Calvin Coolidge served as president during the boom years of the 1920s, but he was very much the opposite of the stereotypical view of the decade, and can seem almost anachronistic to us now. He was quiet, had a very dry sense of humor, and was conservative, a man who was one of the more old-fashioned people of his generation. And the circumstances around him becoming president were some of the most unusual in American history. Our story begins in the summer of 1923. President Warren G. Harding had recently finished a trip to Alaska as part of his voyage of understanding, and had made his way from Washington State to Oregon to San Francisco. By this point, he was exhausted. On the night of July 27th, he reported abdominal pain, though he seemed to recover, but his health quickly declined on July 29th. Upcoming California events on his itinerary were canceled, and he rested at the Palace Hotel in San Francisco. On the evening of August 2nd, as his wife Florence was reading aloud a positive article about him in the Saturday Evening Post, he collapsed and was pronounced dead shortly afterward. For the first time in over 2 decades, a president had died in office, making the vice president the new president. But where was the vice president? Calvin Coolidge, never too enthusiastic about Washington society, had gone with his wife Grace up to his father's home in his hometown of Plymouth Notch, Vermont. He had planned August 2nd to be his last day there. Plymouth Notch was a village practically stuck in time. There was only one telephone, located in the general store, and there was no telegraph station. The Coolidge family home didn't have electricity, instead relying on old-fashioned gas lamps for lights. From San Francisco, a telegram had been rushed to Washington, D.C. about Harding's death. From there, the message eventually made its way to Bridgewater, 8 miles away from Plymouth Notch. The telegrapher there called the phone at the general store, but there was no answer. It was quite late at night by this point, so the store was closed. A group of 3 men, including Coolidge's chauffeur, set out from Bridgeport to Plymouth Notch by automobile. They were soon followed by a small group of newspapermen who had been sent to cover the vice president's vacation. They had gotten wind of this developing story, and now they had one of the biggest scoops of the decade. The original 3 men got to the Coolidge house first, and knocked on the door, which was answered by a drowsy and probably confused John Coolidge, the vice president's father. This is how Calvin Coolidge himself told the succeeding events. "I was awakened by my father coming up the stairs calling my name. I noticed that his voice trembled. As the only times I had ever observed that before were when death has visited our family, I knew that something of the gravest nature had occurred. He placed in my hands an official report and told me that President Harding had just passed away. My wife and I at once dressed. Before leaving the room, I knelt down and, with the same prayer with which I have since approached the altar of the church, asked God to bless the American people and give me power to serve them. My first thought was to express my sympathy for those who had been bereaved, and after that was done, to attempt to reassure the country with the knowledge that I proposed no sweeping displacement of the men in office, and that there were to be no violent changes in the administration of affairs." Coolidge quickly sent a telegram of sympathy to Florence Harding, the president's widow, then typed up his oath on a typewriter. His father was a notary public, so he was assumed to be authorized to administer the oath. So it was there at 2:47 a.m., away from modern civilization, that Calvin Coolidge was sworn in as the new president by his own father by lamplight, using the Bible that had belonged to his dead mother. By Coolidge's count, there were only 6 people present in the sitting room to witness this historic moment. Due to the small number of newspaper reporters that had been assigned to covering Coolidge on his vacation and the remoteness of the village, the event was less of a media circus than it normally would have been. After a long and exhausting night, Coolidge immediately left for Washington, D.C. the next day and took the oath of office again. Because the circumstances of the first oath were so unusual, a second oath was done just in case there was a technical issue. John Coolidge was a notary public for Vermont, in other words, a state official, not a federal one, and it was unclear if this was legally acceptable. So, the second swearing-in was done by an associate justice of a federal district court. This second swearing-in was actually kept secret for some reason, and wasn't officially confirmed to have happened until 1932. And with that, Calvin Coolidge was President of the United States. Up to that point, he was really only known for his handling of the Boston police strike in 1919, when he was the governor of Massachusetts. He had kept a pretty low profile as vice president. He didn't enjoy attending the social events that his position required him to go to, and just wasn't a person who really wanted the spotlight. With the scandals of the Harding administration just starting to come out, would Coolidge be able to retain Republican dominance after such a political disaster? I guess that's for another video. I just thought I'd make this short video because I found it so interesting how the circumstances of Coolidge's swearing in were so Calvin Coolidge. Aside from the death of his predecessor and the late hour, I feel like this was exactly how Coolidge would have wanted his inauguration to happen. It was in an old-fashioned environment, there weren't many people there, and he got to take the oath of office from his own father, who he respected more than anyone. Well, I guess that's all for now, all you sheiks and gals out there, but stay tuned for more tales from the Jazz Age.